That's a
Mm.
that's a big moment.
Alright.
Okay, hello everyone.
Okay.
So welcome to the Midweek Report. I'm Nick. This is the Justin. I
Yes.
don't know why, but I said this is the Justin. The
Fucking
Justin.
gamer. Actually, funny enough, though.
The one Justin we have. We have
No,
12 more in the back.
no, real quick. Funny enough, actually, the Justin, that was like some variant of my original YouTube username.
Oh, there
So,
we go.
I think it was like the Justin. No, it was the Gaming Justin. Like it was like this long, useless
Didn't you just
name.
say it was like just gaming Justin at
Yeah,
one
I
point?
don't know. I think I started. It started with the. I don't know. It was useless. I got rid of it real fast.
The Justin. We have 12 more just like him in the back.
Removed. Delete.
We're buying more we're buying new ones every time one of them burns out. It's brilliant. It's a
Oh,
wonderful system. We call this capitalism. Um
extreme capitalism for you and me.
Extreme capitalism. So, speaking of burnout, today is not a good day
Mm.
because I have to deliver to you news, not news per se. I like that part, but news about a company that I like their products very much of. One of the companies I like very much. And they do very bad.
Mm. Gone. No more.
No more.
Mm.
Company specifically is Bungie. So, a recent article came out on IGN. Again, all linked in the description, but we'll get to the sources later. About a massive, well, battle per se going on inside of Bungie for the studio's for a better work culture in the studio, which is apparently since 2011 and maybe even before been described as well, toxic as per se, which in this industry isn't all too surprising these days because it seems every day we have a new studio that's been around since, the olden days that apparently has a boys club that likes to destroy everyone that isn't part of said boys club. So
Yes.
let's get into it. So I'm not into sure how to transition nicely into this. It's just let's go.
Yeah, it's just kind of a. Here we go.
Yep, here we go. So basically, what they did is they started out with saying that in September, basically, Bungie made a huge announcement about would hire a diverse about Bungie's attempts to hire a diversity and exclusivity director. Now, before you ask what that means, no, I don't know either, but I'm assuming it's a good thing. All full disclosure, I do not know what that would include, but there it is. Anyways, and updating hiring practices for more modern hiring practices. Maybe not judging people based on their color and stuff like that.
Yes.
And then improving training and tools and allow anonymous HR reporting, as well as ending forced arbitration. Again, another thing I'm not too sure of, but it's described as very not good, so probably should look that before the show. In fact, I'm going to look it up right now just to give you context. I might be the only guy who knows what that is, and the rest of you in the audience are like, how does he not know what that is? But sorry. Okay. Deprives people of their day in court when company violates the law.
Yes.
For
You
bank
violated the
accounts,
law.
student. Okay, forced arbitration clauses are found in fine print and contracts for bank accounts, student loans, cell phones, employment, nursing, homes, and more. These clauses deprive people of their day in court when a company violates the law, forcing victims into a system that is often biased, secretive, and lawless. So, there you go. If you're wondering what forced arbitration is, there's the textbook definition. Anyways, this announcement lauded across the industry. This was lauded across the industry, appearing to set a more proactive, and I'm quoting the article at this point, proactive, forward-looking moves amid an industry-wide working conditions scandal. Which, considering all the stuff going on with Blizzard Activision at the moment, yeah. However, many inside the company had a different opinion about this going forward. Many of them chose to remain anonymous, but one did actually choose to be named and gave a lot of her own experiences into the story. But again, we'll get to that later. Anyways, ugh, excuse me, I have a hair on my tongue. It's
Alright
weird.
then. I have a hair in my tongue.
I don't know how that got there, but yeah. Shows you this show is live.
Eh,
That is not getting cutting out in editing.
well, it might. Maybe not. Probably not.
It might. The editor. No, it might.
Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
I have to please this Justin. Justin number 3 is not out until next week.
25 still
Anyway.
in the shop.
25 still in the shop. They're still making him. They're still trying to find the parts. Anyways, according to many of its current and former employees felt that this experiences at the company going far back as 2011 and as recently as this year dramatically clashed with Bungie's virtuous self-portrait, which is another thing we tend to see in the industry. Ubisoft is well known for being, yes, we're, all for exclusivity. Well, really not being for exclusivity behind the scenes. But anyways, different company, different story. Back to Bungie. While some praise the news, for many others, hiring a D&I director or ending mandatory arbitration in all employees' contracts was far too little, far too late. For others still, it was only one step in a long journey to a potentially better future, but with roadblocks remaining along the way. But IGN spoke to 26 current and former employees that worked at Bungie within the last decade. Their accounts of the studio work culture encompasses a wide range of experiences that spans overt sexism, boys club culture, crunch, and HR protection of abusers, as well as complex stories of microaggressions, system inequalities, and difficulties in being heard. Now, interviewers also include a number of more recent employees who, despite their own hurt, believe the studio is slowly but steadily improving. Arcaded about the immense challenges of turning to such a massive ship, of trying to turn such a massive ship, in a better direction, and whose accounts of change line up with statements made to IGN by Parsons in response to this piece. So, long story short, IGN interviewed old people and new people at the company and got some pretty nasty stories.
Thoughts.
But new employees are feeling that there is hope for the company in a better future. It's not one of those where, full disclosure from the beginning before we get into the too depth of the piece. This isn't a story where it's going to be, this company's rotten from the core inward and don't expect change anytime within the next 100 years. Like I would say with EA or Activision or Blizzard.
Differences have occurred over time.
Yeah, there's clearly a feeling in the studio that there is hope for a better future and that there is actual change. Unlike I think we discussed with Ubisoft. I think we did a piece on them. Yeah, we did. But where they feel that, the studio's like, oh, we're changing. And then when you ask people in the studio, it's like, yeah, nothing's changing. It's all the same. Here there is hope for actual change from the employees and not just the executives, which is a good sign because when the executives tell you there's hope for change, yeah, sure. When the employees actually say there's hope for change, that's when I believe it because they're the ones who are actually having to deal with this shit, not the executives who are sitting on their mounds of money. Anyways, moving back to the story.
Don't mind
that. Let me just pick out a nice big one. Okay. Forgive me. This article is very, very, very long, and I recommend all of you read it. It's linked down in the description. If you want to read it in full, we're just going to pick out the big points to talk about here because otherwise we'd be sitting here for 5 hours and not 1 hour, so, or however long this takes. So, for the sake of readability, okay, I'm just going to read one of the big side facts. I'm just scrolling for a good one. Forgive me, it's on my computer, and the way the font plays out makes it small. Aha! Okay, writers would learn about changes to their work wouldn't learn about changes to their work until after voice lines had already been recorded, and when people objected, he told them they needed thicker skin. So this one is
real side note, real quick. Isn't it the writer's job to actually write how the story's meant to be?
Well, here's the thing. This kind of preludes. I probably should have given some prelude to this. This lead was not the only narrative team member impacted by burnout on Destiny 1, because it actually says that apparently much of Destiny 1's narrative team left after Destiny 1.
Yes.
and a whole new one was brought on to Destiny 2, which was much more inclusive and diversive, but didn't get much better treatment. So while it was exactly great in terms of, led by women and color and stuff like that, treatment-wise, they were still getting just as drilled in terms of the screws, so to speak. Here we go. This mentions it. Yeah, here we go. Creating an increasingly toxic work environment, again, due to this massive crunch that they were doing in Destiny 1. Enough so that team members kept a countdown of days since his last explosion on a whiteboard. Many people I spoke to were familiar with a story of him, and again, it doesn't mention who him is, but not a good guy by the sounds of it. Many people I spoke to were familiar with a story of him throwing a chair at a window because he felt others were ruining his creative vision of the game. And yet he stayed at the studio for several years, eventually leaving, and then being invited back to do contract work on Destiny 2. Some sources who encounters with him during this later period said he would frequently issue narrative direction despite no longer being a senior team member, and would become angry when he felt the D2 writers were deviating from his original vision of Destiny 1. One source told a story of him yelling at her over the phone so aggressively that she was brought to tears, and she subsequently refused to be on phone calls with him without a third-party presence. So, not a good dude. Not a fucking good dude.
Oh. Yep. It's all shit. Depression inside. Remove it. Exclude it. Replace. Better. Make.
But I mean, it does show you that there was a lot of pressure on the narrative team in D1, and so much so that a good chunk of them said feck it at the end and just left, and hiring on a whole new team. So,
yes.
another big point here is that the narrative team worked 60, 70, 80, even 100-hour weeks during some expansions, frequently with no breaks in between crunch periods. So, again, it goes to show you that they've been putting the screws to them ever since, and, and again, this is kind of focusing on the narrative team, because remember, Bungie, or should I say Destiny 2, is a very narrative kind of heavy game. Anyone who's played it can tell you. I'm very much into the narrative. So, this is kind of a big problem, and I can exactly, now I can sympathize with the team a lot because, well, not sympathize per se, because I don't exactly have any similar experience to this, but I don't want to say pity, but, I see the problem here.
Yeah.
And I understand being someone who loves the lore very much, and I can, I'm truly like, okay, maybe they should. So it shows you that all these pushbacks for things like Witch Queen are actually good things, because otherwise, well, we'd be getting more of this, which, isn't good. Moving on to one point. Even aside from its turbulent senior members, the narrative team was in chaos, and I'm skipping ahead in the article again. If you want to read it all, it's in the description. Even aside from its turbulent senior members, the narrative team was in chaos throughout the development of Destiny 2 and a number of its follow-up expansions, constantly having to shift new content. It saw high turnover and burnout as a result. Hipponia, one of the people who actually allowed herself to be named, recalled an ongoing struggle to get narrative contractors hired full-time to help ease the burden on the team. Even though the department was overwhelmed, it was repeatedly denied requests to bring on new full-time team members, and contracts would often not be renewed or extended in time, resulting in months-long periods where development was left understaffed. And then it goes on to mention those long work weeks. So, another source said that the team had been told not to crunch as part of a growing studio push to eliminate the practice. The idea was that the studio would simply cut features if crunch was the only way to get them done. However, many of the writers felt that they had been backed into a corner after the painful release of Destiny 2's first DLC expansion, Curse of Osiris. I remember that. On a side note. It was one of the moments where Destiny 2's community went full up in arms, and it was not good. There were a lot of hate on Reddit, which is mentioned in the next bit. Curse of Osiris' story had been lambasted on Reddit, with a few female team members being singled out by the community for harassment, death threats, and vitriol. Other sources say these women didn't receive support inside the studio or from the community team for what they were going through, and multiple sources were aware of one member of leadership still at the studio who emailed Reddit comments about these women to other company leaders in a seeming bid to tear down the narrative team because players didn't like the story, which I'm not sure how to comment on that. That's just, I don't want to say petty, but just bullshit in general.
Yeah. Yeah, just a lot of... Oh boy.
He continues saying the same leader is also said to have been dismissive during a meeting about the controversy, explaining that no one should be worried because they were just going to bring back the Destiny 1 writing team to solve everything. In fact, multiple people familiar with the team related stories of its members being treated poorly by other departments at the studio, being constantly derided, my bad, when the game was received badly. So basically, whenever the story was doing great, they're like, okay, cool. And whenever the story was sucking, they're like, what the fuck, narrative team? This is all your fault. Which, again,
yeah, it's
really?
like kind of hard for it to be their fault when you didn't hire people when they asked for you to hire people. Like, they kind of told you things weren't going well and you just kind of ignored it, but you know.
Anyways. Yeah, nothing good here.
No.
Anyways, it goes on. As a result, the narrative team was afraid of what would happen if it shipped something else that appeared to the community to be incomplete or not up to standard. So they continued to crunch, some going so far as to hide the overtime from their lead so they wouldn't enforce story cuts. Crunch was exacerbated by the constant need for revisions and last-minute changes, often worsened by constant conflicts over who had control of the creative direction. Overall, was fraught due to the pull of different groups and powers at the studio. Some of Bungie's old guard, we'll mention those in a bit, were especially precious about the vision of Destiny 1 and reluctant to change anything about the tone, characterizations, or direction of the story as the game moved into Destiny 2 and its subsequent expansions. This was especially frustrating for the team in cases where that vision had been explicitly defined, had never been explicitly defined in the game or elsewhere, but only existed as ideas in the heads of the people who no longer worked in narrative.
Yep.
So basically, you have this old guard who have this very set vision for D2, some of which who don't even work in narrative anymore, and some people in the new one who work in narrative but are constantly fighting for control. And since Bungie's Destiny had no clear, what it should be anywhere, it was all just fighting over who had the better idea, it sounds like. And good luck finding a winner in that discussion.
Yeah, why not?
Another issue was the development of cinematics, and again it goes on, which were considered a prestige project, largely written separately from the main writing team in a star chamber, don't ask. The cinematics team frequently tried to operate independently from the main narrative team, resulting in disconnects between the established lore, planned quest narratives, and major story beats. The cinematics team decisions, Hipponia and others recalled, would override decisions made by narrative team, forcing last-minute rewrites and more crunch. My bad. So it seems the cinematic team wanted to be, or at least were treated as the stars of the show, and would sometimes just go off and do their own thing without telling the continuity department.
You know, the people who are meant to connect everything together.
Yeah. Which it seems had the expected result of forcing last-minute rewrites, more crunch, and sometimes just off-brand lore. So it's
always fun, isn't it?
I'm just gonna skip ahead, go out a few bits paragraphs because there's a lot going on there. Anyways, one of the next big points is they have that core value that they don't tolerate assholes, even if they're rock stars, but they totally do. These are values they want to get, but they're not enforcing them. So basically, like, we don't tolerate bullshit,
but we tolerate
bullshit. They're saying it, but they're not actually tolerating it. forgive me, that's my phone in the background you might be hearing. One top company leader, after this point, who had been working with Bungie since Halo, was described by sources as an asshole, just straight up, and would constantly disparage others. Others was dismissive of those who brought up the company's toxic culture, didn't bother to learn anyone's name, and whose inappropriate work wardrobe at one point included a shirt that advertised free lap rides. Ugh.
How original.
I'm telling you, people. Why? Anyways. He was also seen getting incredibly drunk at company events and would even clip his toenails at his desk. Notably, this person rose at the company's topmost levels before being quietly let go after years of issues. An ambiguous company email announced his departure, referenced the company's zero-tolerance policy for bad actors, and offered employees mental health support if needed. A different individual, who was mentioned by a number of sources who had been at Bungie since Halo 3, eventually rising to a director-level role, so one of the overseers, essentially, throughout the Destiny games productions. Sources described him as extremely abusive to his team, with some noting his team seemed to work more late nights than others, one describing him as just torturing his staff, quoting there, while others described multiple instances of sexist and racist remarks. Another source close to his team described numerous instances of him intimidating employees in one-on-one meetings and viciously berating his team when work didn't meet his standards. So, another very bad actor here.
Yep.
Skipping ahead to the HR bit, there was at least one long-standing Bungie employee in HR still with the company who almost all of our sources described as actively protecting harmful individuals. Multiple people said that their job seemed to make it all go away. So describing this person's role, to make it all go away. Whenever someone had an issue with a company, one person recalled them as incredibly insulting to various employees behind their back and being catty towards women about how they dressed, including calling a woman a slut. Which, I'm not even going to say all that's not even, not office talk, people. Anyways, it's a well-known fact if you talk to HR, you're putting your own job on the line. So in reference to basically how they're saying that if you talk to HR, there's a good chance you might be let go instead of the guy or person or woman, whatever, who's the problem here.
Yes.
The influence of this individual, coupled with numerous other negative encounters with other HR representatives over the years, resulted in a near universal mistrust of HR from almost everyone we spoke to. Many of them noted that they struggled to trust HR anywhere as a general rule. HR, they pointed out, generally exists to protect the company rather than its employees, which, I mean, in fairness, all HR companies are meant to do, sadly. Just ask anyone who's been employed for a long time. HR is fucking useless. But Bungie's HR was, for many, on a different level. Weird, that almost sounds like a retort to what I just said. It's a well-known fact, if you talk to HR, you're putting your own job on the line, said one person. Again, that's where that quote came from. HR has never been there to protect employees. They've always been there to protect the company. I've watched it happen a few times at Bungie, where someone went to HR and things went completely sideways for them. Aside from the obvious issues inherent to having a number of people in positions of power at Bungie who are known as toxic, sexist, or otherwise problematic, their behavior, their beliefs over the years permeated the company's culture in other less immediate obvious ways. For instance, in deciding what kind of people would over time get to wield power and creative influence at the company alongside them, what kinds of people would not. Women especially struggled at Bungie over the years. Multiple women I spoke with described an environment where men cultivated a pervasive atmosphere in which women were inferior. Many sources say women were disappointingly talked over in meetings, and their ability to do their jobs questioned, and their ideas ignored when used by men who later took credit for them. So basically men said, oh, that was my idea, and yeah, they simply accepted that.
Yes.
Had their questions or input dismissed. Issues that also seem to have impacted people of color at the studio or other genders through women of color were especially impactful. One woman recalled numerous meetings where she would give feedback or ask a question, and it seemed as though no one had ever heard her. I was completely invisible. And it goes on. One of the main points going on here is a lot of women were put on what I would call unappealing projects, things that were not going to succeed in a way that would allow them to shine in a review period. So basically they were set up to fail by corporate, Anyways. However, there is a little bit of a happy ending here, I would like to say. From 2016 to 2018, Hophonia became part of an internal diversity committee that, again, the woman who spoke out. Sadly, I probably should have mentioned her role in this going forward, but we'll circle back to it. That had been formed the year before. The committee was an official Bungie group that because of company restrictions on allotted hours for meetings and lack of considered support for this particular group's needing to be successful, met only during lunch breaks rather than work hours. About half of the original committee was made up of diverse individuals from various departments who were there to push for change, while the other half were made up of company leaders, all white, who Hophonia and other sources say put roadblocks in every turn. Pushes to add a gender-neutral bathroom to the company, to support the Black Lives Matter movement, and to complete a survey that would rate Bungie on its LGBTQ+ equality and inclusion. Were all stymied and rejected. Hophonia and other diverse members began to question the committee in 2018 as the committee bled members. Bungie eventually decided that it was overall ineffective and shut it down entirely. So, not a great one. Interestingly enough, they do have a follow-up on the end here, an update, because IGN does update their articles. Bungie post-publication reached out with, again, this is update from 12/10/2021. I probably should have given context. This whole business with Bungie came out on the 10th, but because of my whole exam bit, I failed to see it at the time for last week's episode. So I am sorry I didn't get to this sooner. That we didn't get to this sooner. But I'm kind of happy in a way, because then I have more time to look into this and do it justice, because I don't feel half-assing these pieces is worth it.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. Post-publication, Bungie reached out with additional statements saying it never deemed the committee overall ineffective or shut it down. Rather, it struggled along for the time for many of its members departed. Quote, our members, currently 100% comprised of individuals from unrepresented communities, deserve to be accurately remembered for their unceasing efforts despite the challenging nature of the work they had taken on, unquote. The statement read. So, your typical company statement of, we had no idea. Anyways, another group that met extraordinarily challenges at Bungie were those who dealt with physical or mental health issues. While Bungie's company health benefits were laundered by many we spoke to, a number of people also mentioned struggling or knowing people who struggled with physical or mental problems for which Bungie was not just unaccommodating but sometimes even hostile. One individual with health issues was forced to self-medicate with leftover medications from a previous surgery because they weren't allowed to take any more off to address or take any more time off to address or alleviate these issues during crunch. When you look at it all compiled together, all these things that are indicators there is a problem, and not just content that you've never heard anyone say anything racist. So, there's a lot of things to work through here. However, I will end with a little bit of positive note before we go on to some other testimonies. People are willing to learn, but it would be so nice to be somewhere where everyone already knows. So, and another one says, own your failures, stop hiring them. We know, it is known. Show us industry-defining progress in a testament of marginalized employees, that can't possibly be mistaken for virtue signaling. So basically just saying to people, I am good, look at my good friends.
Yeah, look at us. We are friends.
For those who don't know, virtue signal is basically literally the definition of saying, I'm a good person. See, I have black friends.
See, I'm friends with the Teletubbies. See, the Tubbies love me. The Tubbies aren't even there.
You're not helping the point, weirdly enough, I think.
At
but
all.
but you get the point. Basically, virtue signaling is saying to everyone that you're a good person by basically showing off all the good things you've done. While not actually, it's all an act just to make
Not
people think you're a good
actually
person.
helping people. You're just kind of helping
You're just kind
certain
of,
people.
well, you're just doing it to kind of make everyone believe you're a good person.
Yeah.
As for Haponia herself, as we mentioned throughout the article, she's one of the ex-employees who was willing to be named in the article, whereas many of them weren't. A woman of color whose stories of teen turmoil were corroborated by a number of others. Many other sources saw the plight of the narrative team from outside, but Haponia was mired directly within it. Hired initially as a contractor in 2016, she first started as Bungie as a copy editor, then later as a full-time employee on the narrative through 2019. So if you're wondering who she was as we're referencing her, that's who she was. So she was right in the middle of it. Where in the world? There's one piece I'd like to have. But there's also a piece in this where one of them was so sick, forgive me, I can't find in the exact article, and quote it for you. But basically, there was one point where one of the team members was also so sick, but wanted to get this, story out, that they literally had someone write it for them while they dictated because they were just so sick they couldn't actually write anything. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a telltale sign when you have someone who's like really sick and someone else is writing for them that something's not right. Like
yeah.
you're obviously overworked. You're obviously being overworked and nobody's caring that you're overworking.
But like I said, this does kind of end in a positive note for this article, specifically where it says that they are making changes, people are willing to learn, and they actually are taking strides here as far as the employees themselves are saying. So, you know,
Hopefully it
it
continues to
is
go in the
changing.
right direction.
Interestingly enough, on a side note, there are a few other articles here, two of which, there are two videos here I've linked, outside another article from IGN. IGN did a supplementary article later on that basically talked about their head of HR, who apparently, according to Bungie themselves, only a week after the article came out, their head of HR left.
Yes.
They say that Bungie's head of HR, Guillermo Del Holt, is stepping down from her role at the company after more than 14 years effectively today, IGN has learned. In an email circulated to employees today, which IGN has seen in full, DeHolt reflected on her time at the company, saying she wants to do everything in her power to make sure everyone who works here was a safe, welcoming, and supportive environment. She then cited the need for the company's people team for the company's people team to move forward with membership largely comprised of new people to Bungie. So basically, chop out all the old rot. That seems to be the problem here.
Mm.
But it is interesting that literally only a week or a few days. This was on the 15th, and the old article came out on the 10th. So
Mere
yeah, just about
days.
a week after the article, HR left after being bashed in the article. I'm sure there's no connection at all. But apparently, she herself had her own experience. She added that this included reporting her own abuser, an executive, and someone she thought was her friend, which resulted in Bungie firing him. She says that I'm proud of the work I did at the company. I believe I made recommendations that were in the best interest of our people and the services of the company we wish to become. I also believe we made mistakes, and that to become a better version of ourselves, the company I know we can be, we have to acknowledge and comfort and confront them in good faith and grow together. The whole announcements come less than a week after, they themselves even addressed it came a week after their extensive report on Bungie.
Mm.
Bungie did not request for comment in time for publication, so
There you go.
at least on this one. So it's a mess. But clearly there are clear efforts for Bungie, chopping away the rot. and there is hope in the employees that there will change. Another video, or two videos we posted down below, are two of the big lore masters for Destiny. And you're probably thinking, what the hell are they doing here? Well, one of them you may have heard of, well, both of them, if you follow the lore community for Destiny, you've probably most certainly heard of. One of them being Myling Games. Now, if you know Destiny, you know that they also have 3 lore anthologies, massive books, that were basically used to comprise all the lore of the game together. Now, Mylan was contracted by Bungie himself, or by Bungie themselves, to curate these 3 anthologies. So, if you're wondering why he's in here, he did a personal response to this article detailing his experiences at the company through his contract with the company throughout the several months long process of writing just the first volume of this anthology series. And he basically confirms everything in this article. He met the old guard, he had his work undermined. In fact, he himself even states in his piece that his original role and actual credit in the book was meant to be lore curator, but was later changed to, I believe it was lore referencer, or something of that nature.
How do you? I'm
The
just
reason is because of
yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's like real quick. It's like how does that work? Like a referencer. It's like what do you mean referencer?
I don't remember what it was. It was I think it was lore lore consultant. Or
Yeah,
something of that nature.
either way, like that just does not sound right. It's like why Bungie? Why?
Well, that goes into having your work changed at the last minute, because he said that the whole reason was about a few weeks before publication, but before they were going to send off the final draft to the rest of the company and say, here it is ready for print, someone came in, he said a few weeks before, who basically demanded, he explain everything he did, why he did it, and basically wanted to make changes to the entire story. Wouldn't be bad if not for the fact that this was done literally, I think, 3 weeks before the final draft was meant to be sent in, or like 2 weeks or something, or 1 week, I think, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
A project that entirely took 3 months to complete, I believe he said. So when you have someone who came in like at most 3 weeks before the final draft and says, hey, make corrections,
like, really?
And to add insult to injury, again, I'm not going to take away from it. Again, watch his video. It gives you his full experience and everything, including meeting this old guard, which what he described. This was probably a member of the old guard who was defensive about the work they're doing. He said that his original credit, when he eventually read the final transcript, because he got it himself, because again, he put the bloody thing together alongside the rest of the company, he actually learned that this new member of the team, who he'd never met before, who was brought in again, like I said, about maybe 3 weeks before the deadline, and suggests all these changes, was then given his role of lore curator. And he was given the role of like lore consultant. And no one told him about this, he said, and he wouldn't have even known unless he'd actually bothered to read the final draft which he was sent. And he got on a call with them, and a bunch of stuff happened. Eventually, he got it resolved satisfactorily, but again, it just goes to show you that this shit does exist. If you don't believe me, there's someone who actually bloody was big on writing the bloody books for them who's backing this up. The next one is Byf, and he is also another major name in the lore community, well known as Lore Daddy. Sorry, Byf, if you ever hear this. It's nothing personal.
Cease. Cease.
Yeah, he has opinions on that name. But anyways, he himself has worked with Bungie themselves as well to different degrees over the years. But his is more a case of he knows people who have suffered through this, if not he himself. And he's basically just saying, this shit is real. We should do better, and basically a more focus on the community side of things, specifically when we mentioned Reddit and the
Well,
toxicity in Reddit around the time of, say, Curse of Osiris, which I was there as well. I can vouch, was a very toxic time in the community. It was not pretty to be a Destiny player during Curse of Osiris.
well, I mean, here's the thing that a community can do is the fact that, like, depending on your actions as like part of the community, you go and help determine how certain things go on. Like, if you go and behave in a certain way and you make the execs see that and they're like, oh, this doesn't look too good. The execs will go and take that and like start, bambasting on the others. Like, it's kind of a loop that goes on in itself when it comes to a community, because the community can go and make the developers feel bad, and the developers will feel even worse because then the heads will be looking at the community and being like, oh, you guys failed, these guys hate it. Like, it's
Well,
just it plays a
it seems
role.
like
It's not a big part of it, but it will play a role into it.
I mean, it certainly seems like the community was involved in essentially what was an echo chamber,
Yeah.
which was essentially the community was like, this story sucks, and because the narrative team was already getting a lot of flack from the studio heads, they just kind of dogpiled on and said, yeah, you guys suck, to put it very frickin' simply.
Yeah.
So, and again, you'd think a game as narrative heavy as Destiny would treat their narrative department, for Void's sake, with more respect
Negative.
and not basically just beating the whip onto them like you'd think something like EA or Activision would do. I can understand this. I don't support this behavior in the slightest, but I can at least understand it coming from someone like Activision or certainly EA, who, let's be honest, hasn't given 10 shits about their games in years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's just so much fun, isn't it?
it certainly is a massive pile of rubbish. Again, this does end with a little bit of a happy note where the employees do say that there is active change here and that there is hope for the studio.
Well, I mean, the other side about
It's
it
just
too.
a difficult task.
The other side about it too is the fact that if they're saying like things have improved since the past, then clearly there is better like things being done to like lessen and slowly improve upon what has happened. So we just gotta hope that that kind of thing keeps happening. Like improvements keep coming, and it doesn't keep getting worse.
Well, here's kind of one of the quotes kind of supporting that. Okay. Let me just find a nice, good one. Yes, here we go. Parsons, who's the big name over at Bungie. I believe he's the CEO. Okay, Parsons confirmed to IGN that departures had happened. Admittedly, the company had not been as transparent or swift as it could have been in removing individuals, and adding that Bungie was only able to do this when brave people came forward or when bad behavior is conducted out in the open. Parsons himself said, "We believe that people whose behavior warranted removal from our company have been terminated or are no longer working for Bungie. But if new information comes to light, whether the story or by named or anonymous people coming forward, we will act on that information and investigate that integrity. There's no catharsis when this is another piece here outside of what Parsons said. There's no catharsis when bad actors are thrown out. There's no awareness, or who's a bad actor to avoid. Without that, I don't think it's possible to build trust on a wide scale." And they continue on the article. While this may be good news for the future of Bungie, their former victims who were aware of this exodus told us that they felt betrayed and left behind. Their careers, mental health, and emotional well-being were repeatedly damaged for years, they said. Meanwhile, the people who harmed them have moved to other companies and will continue to largely be celebrated by their colleagues and the gaming public because, as far as the other companies go, we know what the industry is like here, let's be honest.
Not
And
to the
because of
10
their
out of 10.
Hmm?
Not to the 10 out of 10.
And because of their non disparagement agreements, there's no way to safely call them out, even in an article like this. You do need some kind of justice, said one person. That's what's absent. There's no again, just going on to what he said. Without that, I don't think they can build trust on a wide scale. Broadly, company culture is always a work in progress, but Bungie has taken several sufficient actions in the last few years in the right direction. Several sources note that in 2018, when Bungie brought on a diversity and inclusion D&I lead, there appeared to be a significant push by the studio to start having measurable goals for the amount of diverse individuals in leadership positions. Though some people within the studio pushed back, those goals were put in place.
Yeah.
And while there's still work to do, Bungie's previous blog post maintains that there's been progress on the topmost levels of the company. According to Parsons, women or people from underage communities comprise half of the company's board of directors, and 40% of the Bungie's executive team are women, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I don't mean to do this. It just kind of sound like yes, yes, yes.
Look at it. Look at us go. I mean,
Here
I'll
we
make
go.
I'll make a side point real quick. I don't care who or what you are. I mean, you could be like a blobbed green alien for all I care. As long as you put out good work, like as long as you put out something that can be enjoyable, then good for you. Keep doing it. I will support you. But like you shouldn't be bringing people up just because they're a certain way. Like the main goal should always be we want to go and provide good quality work.
I mean, from what it sounds like, crunch is a big issue here. So
Mm.
I don't think bringing people of color on is going to fix that issue. We've already tried that, and it didn't work.
No.
They already
I
said
mean,
in D2 when they brought on a massively inclusive team, all that happened was the team getting bashed to hell and back.
I mean, there are two ways to go and solve like a crunch problem in that case scenario. The first is, hiring actual writers or
Ah,
just hiring people in general, and those people in general can go and communicate with the people who are writing to go and try to soften up the workload a little bit for them, to go and like help them lay out ideas and get things going. Like
uh,
there's
speaking of crunch, I actually, forgive me, didn't mean to cut you off.
well,
But
no, it's
actually
like
just
there's a lot that can be done, but it just doesn't look like they want to do that.
Well, actually, I just confirmed. Actually, I just saw it a little bit in the article. In many of our other sources, as well as Parson, also confirmed that Bungie's crunch issues have actively improved over the last several years. So there is actual steps here. So it's not just, hey, we're making our teams more diverse, as for some reason typically is the fallback of most companies. It's just, I don't mean to undermine that. Yes, we need more inclusive teams, especially in the industry that has originally been a pure white males boys club.
Yeah,
Which,
no, like exactly like I said. I don't care who you are, what you are. Just the quality of what you do should be the primary focus. Like if you want like someone to design a home, you don't want like a fancy person who dresses nice to design your home but doesn't know anything about designing a home. Because for all you know, they can make a home that is very unsafe and unsturdy. Like that's just the primary focus of it. Like you can
it's
be
just that.
whoever you want. I don't care. Be who you want to be. But you know,
I think the whole issue here is just like, yeah, it's like it's good to hear this team is getting more diverse and everything. Yeah, that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking away from that. It's just that I've seen this happen way too many times in the industry. It's just, oh yes, we're hiring diverse people now, and it seems to be the almost universal fallback of all companies these days.
well, yeah,
They're not
but
actually
that
fixing their issues. They're
like
just saying we're hiring more diverse
the
people.
reason why I'm saying this in this way is because every time you hear a company go and say we're hiring diverse people, that's a telltale sign that they're just hiring random people that they like, and they're not hiring people who are to help the people who are needing help. Like they're not hiring people to actually help the teams that are desperately needing it. They're just hiring people who they like and who will make their company look good.
Well, it goes back to that thing of like virtue signaling, right?
Mm,
It's just a thing of like, look, we're hiring diverse people. We're good now, right? But
yeah.
going back to the Bungie's crunch issue, it seems that they actually have improved. According to this, team collaboration was cited as another active development. A few years ago, there was a push studio wide to move to agile development, effectively a methodology where teams come to development solutions through collaboration and teamwork. Opinions on the initial move to this technique were mixed, but current employees we spoke to felt it had ultimately made a difference. When you combine Bungie's uh, irreverent past, forgive me, it's my brain is still booting up. I just woke up an hour ago. With a culture that's being the best or building atmospherical moonshots, I think there was a tolerance for people being mean to each other.
Mm,
One person said it was like stones sharpening stones by throwing them at each other in terms of work culture. There's been a shift, which is actually quite a nice metaphor, if I'm being honest. There's been a shift to being nuanced and empathetic about people's personal growth. People are trying to see the need for more perspectives, but they don't always know how to do it. Sometimes they get in their own way. It's getting better, and our responsibility is to make things better for the future. One internal vehicle for this has been the company's town hall meetings, which is interestingly named, where individuals can ask questions of leadership and then effectively vote on the questions others pose. When the most popular questions in theory getting answered, the system is being a useful venue for many to voice frustration through though to mixed success over the years. In an earlier incarnation, the system didn't provide anonymity, and several sources felt they couldn't be candid or recalled being dogpiled by their peers or even leadership if they asked a question others disliked.
yeah.
With the addition of anonymity, sources said more people felt comfortable asking questions about issues of diversity, burnout, and toxic studio behavior. And while some felt it had been helpful in voicing concerns to management, others noted that leadership often gave a very lukewarm response to serious issues. Several people recalled a senior member of the company responding to a question about a toxic work environment by saying no one has ever come to him about toxicity and that the issue wasn't a serious one. Others remembered questions that appeared to be dismissive or derogatory toward Black Lives Matter and the employee resource group, ERG, Black at Bungie, with one source feeling that management didn't shut these remarks down effectively. People are willing to learn, but wouldn't it be nice to be somewhere where everyone already knows? So, and they continue saying there is a sense among our sources that Bungie is on its way towards a truly safe, inclusive workplace, but it is still a very long road ahead to get there. So, again, there is a sense of change here, but it's a long road here. So the story does end in a somewhat more positive light than usually, where it's just this company's shit, don't expect it to change, you know, business as usual in the industry, right?
You know, every day.
How long have we been going for?
54.
Wow. Holy shit, I am impressed.
Big
I
topic.
think we just set a new record in getting a story out in an actual reasonable time frame. I thought we were like an hour 10 at this point.
Not quite. Not quite.
So there you go. There you go. It's you know,
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's like it needs to be talked about, and the primary things that we as a community can take from this is we can't just harp on things so heavily. If you want to make criticism, make your criticism, but don't make it, you know,
don't
feel
do death threats.
yeah, like there's a hard line between actual criticism and just being a douche.
Yeah.
And then also be aware of like the actions the company as a whole kind of makes, because you can tell when they're not actually helping their teams out by what they choose to do.
Mm-hmm. And again, if you want to read these articles in full, either look at Bice's video, Mylan's video, and his experiences, um, the actual main article about all the things we've cited. Again, everything I've quoted and said is all in the article. Again, link below, and the follow-up article about HR's head resigning in light of all of this. All of that link below if you want to read it. It's a long read, but it's a good read. I'll give you that much. So there you go.
There you are.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. Here's the thing. I wanted to do a review of the New War this week, but then I heard about this literally 3 days ago. And I thought, well, screw the New War. This is a much better topic to discuss and a much more prevalent topic. Maybe we'll do the New War next week. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe.
there's also at some point a little bit of a Halo Infinite review for the campaign.
Ah, yes. Well, we have to give it time. 7 episodes in a row. I haven't decided what our limit of what is considered
Well, it's kind of
time yet.
hard to be in a row when it wasn't in a row, and the fact that we
Well, I
had
mean, not in a row, but
technically at least 3 Destiny / Bungie videos in a row now.
yeah, that is true.
Don't worry, people. We give you news. No matter what, the news has to come out eventually.
I'll consult with like the 9 Justins in the back room, and we'll think of something. Between the 10 of us, we should find something new.
I don't know. Number 6,
Got
10.
one.
I wouldn't recommend talking to number 6 anytime soon.
Yeah,
I
not
think-
after the incident with the blender.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I think the cordyceps virus is well, not even virus, it's a fungus. The cordyceps is finally getting to him. He's been taking too much of that junkie juice.
Gives him one hell of a good look, though.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to do something good, just not
Yeah, it's
everything
supposed to
good.
Not everything good.
Doesn't end well. Shouldn't be taking it, but he takes it.
I mean, let's be honest. When he starts speaking in hive mind, we know there's officially an issue. When he starts referring to himself in the third person.
Yeah, I think it's too late for him. We're probably gonna need to throw him back in the blender.
Yeah, no.
Eh,
Well, gotta prefer the incinerator.
at least
There goes another one.
At least we can feed him to the rest.
Yeah. I'll call the factory. They'll get a new one prepped.
Yeah. Hopefully 22 will be done by then.
Yeah, 22 will be done by then. I got so many of them on back order.
Yeah, well,
They burn out too quickly. As we talk about burnout.
The synths developed them.
Yeah, plot twist. We've actually developed synth technology. How do you think I have so many editors?
Yes.
They all just share one collective consciousness.
You'd think it's a hive, but it's not. We're all just the exact same person. It's one of those
Yeah,
case
they're all just
scenarios
one
where it's like
person.
you talk to one, but you're really just talking to them all.
Yeah. You've talked to one, then you've talked to them all. Trust me.
Yeah. There is no mind. The mind is
There is-
empty.
There is no I in team, just many in synths.
Yes.
So-
Well, hopefully you all enjoyed. For
Yep.
what entertainment we could provide in this dark moment.
No.
But there is a light. There is very much a light at the end of it all.
Yeah. Like I said, Bifes is much more of a community-focused critique about what we should do about this going forward. So if you're kind of thinking, like, what can I do about this? I would recommend looking at his video. Well, maybe not first, but certainly maybe the second thing you look at referring to this, because, like I said, he's more of a, what can we do about all of this kind of thing? In our case, what we can do, we can ramble about it on YouTube and hope someone notices.
Yes.
But anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and in the words of the Immortal Red Green, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. Good night.